So we are recording, and I see people starting to slow down a little bit, but I'll go ahead and start, and then I'll turn it over to Ori to lead us today. So I wanted to thank everyone for joining and welcome me today to our webinar. We're co-hosting with CJ from Amazon Web Services. We've got Ori Locke, who's our head of products here at Salt Security. I'm just going to do a quick little housekeeping logistics. If you have questions, if you want anything answered, you've got the Q&A. Just put your questions in there and we'll either do them while we're talking through it, if it makes sense, or we'll do it at the end. That's really only the only logistics. You guys have all used Zoom before, so you know how to do it. But if you do have questions, you can go ahead and put them in there and we'll start from there. So with that introduction, I will turn it over to Ori.
Thank you so much. Maybe a quick introduction of myself before we'll start, and then CJ, probably makes sense for you to do the same. Ori back, not great to admit it, but I've been in security for almost 15 years now. So you can guess my age. My story is maybe unoriginal, started in the Israeli military, one of the technology units, and from there was part of some great companies and some great security programs. Happy to be here to tell you about the fact that API security, whatever you thought it was, if you thought it was easy, it's easier. CJ?
Awesome. Thanks, Ori. So yeah, my name is CJ Sturgis. I'm a partner solutions architect here at AWS, and I work with partners such as Salt to help them build out products on AWS and reach our customers across different platforms, including AWS Marketplace. So really excited to talk to you a little bit more about API security and Salt solutions to that today. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, CJ. All right, so before CJ gives you some information in terms of his expertise, specifically on AWS, I want to talk at a high level about APIs. Why are they still a challenge? They've been around for a while, and the different types of threats that you might be facing. We like to talk here at Salt about something called the API fabric, right? So when you talk about an API, you're not actually talking about just the APIs. You're talking about the APIs and the entire ecosystem. They're running on things, right? They're running on servers, they're running on gateways, they're running on application load balancers. They're pulling information from other APIs, from databases. There are third-party APIs that you rely on. In fact, think about what we're doing now. What's powering Zoom? Right now, we're in a Zoom webinar. It's APIs. Before this webinar started, I asked my ChatGPT, hey, ChatGPT, give me some tips on running a good webinar. What's behind that? APIs. Your mobile phone, APIs. Smart vehicle, APIs. So really, if you kind of look at that fabric, the one thing that you need to remember about it, that it is exploding, and seems to be that we're constantly making up new reasons to have more APIs. So definitely the introduction of mobile phones really drove people to go to an API first architecture because they wanted their applications to run both on laptops and mobile phones. And there's been some other drivers, probably IoT, but to be honest, AI agents are just exploding the use of APIs. They're consuming APIs, they're helping people build APIs, they're running on APIs, and we're seeing this exponential growth. So it's really not like, hey, why haven't we solved this problem for 10 years? Problem has changed, problem has grown, and that's why it's really important to keep up to date from a security perspective with APIs. CJ, anything you want to add on that before I move on?
No, those are some great points. Especially do think the AI agents and IoTs you mentioned, through this, we're seeing an explosion in the growth of API fabric or the widespread use of the API fabric. And so we're really excited to talk about solutions here.
Let's talk a little bit about the types of risk and why it's challenging. Not only there are more APIs, they keep changing. And I'm not sure, probably a lot of you, or I assume most of you are in software. It used to be, hey, we're going to do this release in 3 months, and then it was in a month, and then it was a sprint. And right now, continuous deployment, right? And an API might change 5, 6 times a day. This is a survey that we've done. Salt, obviously, as a player, we do different surveys and different types of state of API threats. So they're changing a lot. And as a result of that, it's also an attractive target for an attacker, especially attackers that are looking for data, right? So an API is a great way for an attacker to run an attack. And as a result of that attack, not compromise, hey, so I got Ori's details, maybe CJ's details. I want the information of 1 million users. I want to be able to run some type of abuse on 1,000 accounts with one click. So definitely from a threat perspective, we're seeing a lot of growth and a lot of sophistication in terms of how attackers are using APIs. I'm not really, don't want to really go into some of the historical cases. I think all of you have probably heard about them in the news, but if you kind of want to think about the high level types of risks, the vulnerabilities that attackers are abusing, it's actually easy to remember. The names are cool. It's a zombie API. It's not a mutant or dead. It just means that you've deployed an API out there, or a developer has deployed an API out there. It's no longer being used, but it's still out there. So this is risk without reward. Obviously, when you put functionality out there, that there's risk, but there's also reward because that's your business. That's how you run your e-commerce. That's how you run your bank. That's how you run your app. But if you have an API out there that no legitimate user is using, but it's still out there, that's pure risk. So think about Zombie. Think about Rogue. Again, I love the names, right? Rogue is an API that's perfectly fine, except the fact that it's not following the rules. It doesn't go through the path that it should go through. Specifically, as we're talking about AWS have an amazing gateway. That gateway will greatly increase your security and observability. One problem, developers might not go through the gateway. They might just put the API out there. So the worst API is the one that you don't even know about, and it's rogue and it's being unmanaged. And if you kind of look past those two really low-hanging fruit, attackers tend to abuse the permission model of APIs. So the API was built for Ori's user can access Ori's account. Probably the number one thing that an attacker might look for is something called a broken object level access, or BOLA. The name is less memorable. He's going to try to figure, okay, can I use a user and go into other people's accounts? Because developers often miss the fact that the permission model needs to be prohibitive, not just assume that the logged in user is going to use the functionalities intended. He might try to access other functionality. So CJ, from an AWS perspective, what's your view on the threat landscape as it relates to APIs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's four main categories of challenges that we see across AWS environments. And actually, I'd love if we can move to the next slide, I can talk about some of those specifically. So where we see challenges today are across visibility, monitoring, governance, and ultimately deployment. Within visibility, we're talking about the centralized view or lack of a centralized view across accounts. We see with AWS customers, APIs are typically spread across different managed accounts. So that can make it a little bit more difficult to gain a complete understanding and total picture of what your API fabric might be, leading you to those situations where you have a zombie or a dead API that's sitting in your environment somewhere that you're not aware of. Within monitoring, it's actually gaining meaningful insight from events that occur, reducing alarm fatigue, as well as the configuration of effective alarms. I think alarm fatigue is a huge point that we don't talk about enough. It's very, very easy to become overwhelmed with the influx in events and alerts that your monitoring solutions can provide. And ultimately, you're not reacting in a timely manner to the events that do matter to you. So effective alerting and meaningful insights are critical to securing APIs. Across governance too, this is maintaining consistent policies across teams. This is one of the biggest challenges we see, especially as we talk about how there's a widespread use of APIs and the API fabric spanning across multiple AWS accounts. Maintaining consistency across accounts can be a challenge in and of itself, as well as maintaining compliance with internal standards and external regulations. And ultimately, when we go to deploy a solution to help us protect and secure our API environments, we talk through different deployment challenges, such as the time to deploy a complex solution, which may incur downtime or reduced availability while we're standing up that solution. Ultimately, some of these solutions may be difficult to scale, or the integration in scaling those solutions can be complex in and of themselves. And specifically, too, we talk about the challenge of visibility across APIs. Some of the challenges that we see with customers today are the fact that APIs may be developed or managed by multiple teams or business units. So we now have this knowledge siloing where individual teams really understand their APIs well, but maybe that's not effectively communicated across teams or across the units. So ultimately, APIs spread across different AWS accounts or regions. And really, there's a need here for centralized API inventory and management. Today, some of the solutions or approaches to those challenges may include cataloging manually your APIs through spreadsheets, custom scripts, etc. This is ultimately a solution that doesn't scale, right? We have a reliance on individual team members to maintain complete documentation, as well as maybe we can gain some visibility into our API fabric, but largely that's a partial visibility, especially as we talk through APIs that are deployed across accounts. So see, these are some of the main challenges we're looking to address. So an ideal solution is one that's both simple and effective. We know that in today's landscape, rapid threat detection and response are critical, and complex solutions can bog us down in trying to rapidly detect and respond to those different events and alerts. Complex solutions can lead to those delayed insights and missed vulnerabilities. And what we'd really like to see is a simple solution that enables broader adoption across teams and thereby reduces your overall risk as well. So there are a lot of different values in a simple solution. If I had to call out three specifically, it would be the first three on this slide today: the faster time to value, reduced overhead, and improved posture. Through quicker deployment and integration, we can gain immediate visibility into our API security posture and rapidly identify potential threats and vulnerabilities. Through this quicker deployment integration, we spend less time on setup, maintenance, and troubleshooting. We can lower the training requirements for team members and streamline workflows and processes to help keep us secure and protected. And ultimately, this improves our security posture. It's easier to implement consistent security practices, especially across teams, accounts, and units. There's a reduced risk of error in misconfigurations. And ultimately, we have more time for proactive security measures rather than just managing our complex tools. So by prioritizing simplicity and rapid time to insight, we can achieve more effective API security, which allows us to focus on innovation and growth rather than managing complex security tools. That's what we're looking for.
Perfect. Couldn't say it better. And for those of you in the audience, I know I always want to see the demo, so it's coming. That's going to be the hero of this webinar. We're going to spend most of the time on the demo, so thank you for being patient with us. It was just important for CJ and I to kind of set up things before we go in and talk actual solution. From a Salt perspective, two things are important for us. One, and I think CJ nailed it, it's got to be easy. There are so many security challenges. Everybody's busy. APIs keep changing. So if I need to spend a minute every time an API change and start tracking how it changed and all that, that's not going to work, right? So it needs to be super simple to deploy, super simple to consume. As we've worked with customers, we've identified 6 use cases that are typically what drives an API security program, really a security program. APIs are just a building block of the applications and then a big part of application security. And ultimately, it's around can you reduce your attack surface? Do you really need to be exposed as you are? And I mentioned one of those aspects, the zombie API, the one that you have exposure that you don't need. It could be simply, and that's a great starting point, and I wouldn't dismiss it. I want to know which APIs I have without the spreadsheets that CJ mentioned, without spending hours and hours. That's very useful. From a compliance perspective, sometimes you just need to, but even if you don't, think about, hey, I'm a developer, I want to write an API that pulls certain types, a certain amount of information. Big organization, I don't know what's happening. Think about that. There's a certain repository I could go in. Oh, maybe somebody already built this API. That could also have the documentation of the API. If I manage risk, how could I possibly manage risk if I don't know what it is that I'm managing? I need to know which APIs I have. I need to know if I have a problem. Maybe my business isn't running on APIs. So that's really this full inventory, the unified inventory. Obviously, just knowing what you have isn't enough. And the free use cases that we're going to focus on in the demo is really understanding which APIs you have, the full inventory of APIs, governing them. Are they secure? Maybe they are. That's a good thing. You know, we tend to think, maybe me, I don't want to speak for others. Hey, we'll find a security problem. That's a good thing. No, understanding if you're secure is a good thing because that allows you to focus your attention on where it's needed and avoid that alert fatigue and avoid other things. So maybe you're properly governing your APIs. Maybe there are some gaps that you need to cover. Great. And the final use case that we're going to talk about today is the data. Because ultimately, if I look at what APIs are, you can look at them, as I mentioned, hey, it's just the building block of my software. You can say, hey, this is programmatic access, it's an authentication endpoint. Ultimately, it's data. It's data coming in and it's data coming out. Think about an API in that way. Probably the most attractive thing from an attacker perspective is getting to that data. For a lot of you, maybe not all of you, securing that data is the most important thing. So how do you make sure that you're able to govern that data? Those are the 3 use cases that we're going to focus on today. And if you're interested, outside Talk today, we also have really mature capabilities around monitoring for threats, stopping the actual attack as it happens, as well as identifying agentic risk, right? So APIs are also consumed and being consumed by LLMs. But for today, we're really going to focus on those 3 full inventory of APIs, governed posture and compliance, and extend data security. And I think 2 last slides, and then we go to the demo, our hero. What is it you're about to see today? And what is it you're about to see today is AWS specific. And CJ, thank you for the partnership. as we built our integration together with you guys on AWS, we were thinking, let's keep it simple. How do you keep it simple? AWS have built really simple ways in order to deploy a solution, fully automated using CloudFormation. Click of a button, you'll see it in a moment, and you get that discovery. You understand which APIs do I have? Are any of them rogue? Are any of them zombies? Or any of them shadow IT, another type of cool word that I didn't mention, and kind of begin that journey of understanding where you are. And then you're able to continue that journey with the most important thing, which is context. Everybody has security problems. Nobody's 100% secure. Having the context and understanding, okay, but is this about a security problem relates to a critical API for a business? Does it relate to a piece of very sensitive data? That allows you to prioritize, that allows you to understand what to do. And today, as we do the demo, as I will do the demo, I will run you through not only the deployment and how easy it is, but how easy it is to consume, how easy it is to understand which APIs do I have, what risk do I have, what data is flowing through it, and what is it that I can do about it in order to reduce that risk. So why don't we go into the demo? And what you're seeing right now is the Salt Illuminate, Salt platform. And the first thing I want you to understand about the Salt platform, a lot of solutions out there, and they're good solutions. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. There's the solution, there's the use cases. The use cases are outside the solution. So you need to have some expertise about, how do I configure things and how do I do things? As part of keeping it simple here at Salt, we actually have baked in the use cases inside the product. So the same use cases that we talked about before are inside the product. Essentially, there's a very simple wizard. You get asked a couple of questions. Hey, what are you running? AWS in this case. Are you also using Jira? Are you also doing this and that? And then it builds you basically a list of tasks and says, if you're trying to create a unified inventory, go do this. If you're trying to govern, go do this. And you can assign this to different people. We all work in, well, some of us work in complex organizations where we don't necessarily have the permissions to do everything. And we found that this really, really takes the guessing and any kind of like pre-learning expertise out of the equation. And really the demo today, I'm going to run off those use cases inside the product and show you how easy it is. So for this first use case of creating a unified inventory, really it's telling me, hey, here's a simple recipe, follow it. You're probably going to like the dish. And my first instruction, outside of setting single sign-on and Jira, just because that's how I like to work in terms of sending actions, is to grant Salt access to AWS, and our journey begins. So I'm going to go and do that and really show you how simple it is. So I have an AWS environment. We'll sometimes jump to it. There's some gateways, Lambdas. As CJ mentioned, even an organization the size of Salt, no single person knows about everything. People just spin up different regions, different accounts, different departments. And I'm going to connect, and I'm going to click on the AWS Cloud Connect. Remember, this is the concept of running it quickly, and I can either do this at the level of an organizational unit or at the level of an account. I'm going to do it at the level of the account. And I'm going to copy the account number and copy it here into the, into the solution. And essentially what that does is create the cloud formation, redundant space here. And basically, this is everything that Salt needs in order to complete this use case. So that's, should always acknowledge. I'll explain as this is running. It's going to take a couple of seconds. What is it that we're asking for? What kind of permissions? And what is that you get back? What we're asking for is extremely limited. It's read-only permissions for specific resources that have to do with APIs. What you get just by giving Salt those permissions are really three things. We're going to map out any kind of asset that's associated with APIs. This could be your application load balancer. This could be an EKS. Could be an AWS gateway. The second thing is which APIs are running on it. A lot of times you configure which APIs are running on it based on how it's configured. And finally, is it properly configured? So maybe if I'm just running some like exercise in terms of learning how to develop and I've spun that on top of a gateway, that doesn't need a ton of security and rate limiting and a million other things. But if I'm running a critical application, then this authentication better be configured in a certain way, the rate limiting better be configured. So we're trying to figure out not just what assets are out there and which APIs are out there, but also is the combination of all of those secured together. And really, as that is done, the only thing I need to do, copy, paste, click run CloudFormation, it's done. And it's telling me, hey, this is complete. You can start your journey into visibility. Why don't we look into that visibility? What is it that the Salt platform is now telling me? So I'm going into our inventory, and as a result of the action I took, it's telling me that I have all of the above, right? I have some AWS gateways running, I have AKS running, I have an application load balancer with a single API. That's suspicious. We're going to check on that later. It's usually strange when you have a single API. As a result of that, I've really right now accomplished my first objective, which is that I now have a unified inventory. So I'm going to click completed on this task. And really, if the single thing I was trying to get is, hey, just show me all my APIs in a single place, and I want to see some information about each one of those APIs. That's done. However, a lot of us are in security, meaning it's not just about knowing what you have, it's about, is it secure? So why don't we move to the second use case, which is govern, posture, and compliance. And with this use case, we're also going to deep dive into some of those APIs and see some of that information. And essentially, what this onboarding page is telling me, if you want to do that, you can do one of two things. You can, if you have a very mature program and you have your own API security policies, and you can configure them in the system. But to be honest, very, very large percent of our customers go and say, hey, Salt, you guys are the experts. Why don't you tell us how our APIs measure to API security standards? And that's why we've built here at Salt a posture policy hub. Essentially, it's a combination of things that we've researched through our research arm, Salt Labs, a combination of analyzing different industry frameworks, combination of best practices. And it's really about, are the APIs properly built? Are they properly configured? Are they running in the right place? Is the level of the criticality of the API or the sensitivity of the data appropriate? We have about 100 plus of those best practice policies that you can either use or augment or use your own, but a lot of customers use ours. And one of the benefits of using the Salt best practices, that allows us to tell you what the benchmark is. So how are you compared to your peers? How are you compared to the industry? So in my environment, given my use case, I've deployed about 68 of those best practices, the push of a button, right? You don't need to go one by one. And now let's go back to that same inventory and let's understand a little bit about our risk and go a little deeper. And we can go in from a table view and really kind of go in, okay, why is this risk at 7.7 and some other information that's out there. But I'm a visual guy. I like to look at things visually, and I definitely cannot consume, what is it, 100, CJ, you're probably better at math than me, 185 APIs. That's not, the brain does not compute.
Great math.
That's why we here at Salt created something that we call our fabric. I'll put this in a full screen. And it's the same information, but you can consume it in a visual manner. And you can kind of slice and dice it in different ways. So I want to understand risk. So I'm going to ask Fabric, hey, show me what my risk is. And just in terms of my preference, I put it in those boxes, but you can have it as a radial and other types of things. And really, it's telling me, Ori, the majority of your APIs are fine. Gray means zero risk or acceptable risk. Good, that's a good thing, right? So I know that I don't need to worry about, I believe it's about 80 or 90% of my APIs. There are some that have a low level of risk, a medium level of risk, but Ori, 126 of your APIs have a high level of risk, and I'm not happy with that. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to understand what's behind that. So each one of those big boxes is essentially a host. We tend to think about APIs as things that are around hosts, and each one of those smaller shapes are APIs. And I'm immediately going to go to 7.7, right? So that's obviously the ones that I'm not happy about, and I'm going to try to figure out what's happening. Why does this have a high risk score? What's happening within this environment? So I'm going to click on one of those APIs. And let's see what Salt can tell us about this API. So we understand it's a REST API, nothing bad about that. It was first detected today, July 9th. That's just because I deployed the solution today. But if I was running for more than a day, that would have told me if this is this new, is this maybe out there for years. It's telling me that there's sensitive data, which is not bad in itself, but definitely that makes this API a lot more interesting and a lot more risky. Here's where the less positive stuff is being shown. It's not authenticated, and I'm not loving the combination of sensitive data that's running on an unauthenticated endpoint. Even if it's internal, it's not a great practice to put something out there that has sensitive data that's not authenticated. And it's also telling me that there are posture gaps. Basically, this API does not meet the standards, the best practices put together by Salt. And I can go in and I can understand, look at different samples for this API and look at the name of it, vendor, something, unit. I can look at how it's running. I can look at the different requests, how much traffic is running through it, which is frankly not a lot, which is also interesting. And what I'm going to do right now, I really want to look into the posture gaps in this API. I'm not happy with the fact that it has sensitive data, it's unauthenticated, and apparently it does not meet some best practice or standard. So why don't we go in and understand what best practice or standard this API fails to meet? And it's actually two. One is around no rate limiting configure, right? So that's another bad thing. So that if somebody gets to this, it's not authenticated, so easy enough to get to the data. But worse yet, they can just run whatever it is, hundreds, thousands, millions of requests and just pull all my data. So not great in many, not great in many aspects. And this is just an example of the types of posture gaps that Salt is able to identify. Also in my environment, and again, not super happy about it. It's a demo, of course, it's not real, but if this was real, I wouldn't be happy about it. It seems that I've got a zombie API, and Salt has as a best practice a zombie API removal process. What do you do if you have an API that nobody uses? You remove it. Also, there's an API that's not going through the gateway, and in this case, the approved gateway is AWS. So that's there's actually two of those. So again, not great and very simple solution. You guys, CJ at AWS, made it so simple to register an API on the gateway. Actually did some of that as a perfect demo. I think it was about 1.5 minutes per API. Super simple, right? Just go do it, right? At the security level, if it was here, now it's here. You've got authentication. You can set up rate limiting. You've got visibility. A lot of really, really cool stuff that's happening. So I have now essentially completed my second use case, and my second use case was that I wanted to be able to govern my APIs. I am now governing. I haven't fixed any of the issues outside of the few minutes that we have for the demo. I would probably open a Jira ticket or a ServiceNow ticket and ask somebody to fix those two kind of glaring issues that we have. I've completed this use case. I am properly governing my APIs. I understand what the posture is. What I don't understand yet, and I'm going to show you how simple it is to do that, what's the data? What data is flowing in? What data is flowing out? And that's our third use case. So we're going to go to that third use case. And really what the solution is telling me, Ori, you need to take an additional action. You now need to deploy traffic monitoring. And before I go ahead and do that, I'm going to explain why that is. What is traffic monitoring and why it's necessary for this use case of extending data security? Traffic monitoring, again, not an intrusive process. The Salt platform, as any API security, should just be analyzing, monitoring data. It shouldn't be inline, it shouldn't be intrusive, it shouldn't change anything about your environment, definitely not add latency. I know, CJ, you guys at AWS are really proud about having the best across the stack, not just with the gateway, across the stack, the best latency out there. It's still read-only, but it's not just reading configuration, it's actually looking at the requests and responses. Because of the very cool architecture of CloudWatch, we can do that completely offline, completely not inline, completely passively, because basically whatever it is, the gateway, the load balancer, pushes the logs, the request or the API requests and responses into CloudWatch, and then we go ahead and monitor that. Why is it that we need to monitor that versus just looking at the configuration? Because if you want to govern data, you need to move past from theory. Maybe my API says the field is called field 1, field 2, field 3. the response field is called, this is not a sensitive response, right? So anything that I look from a configuration perspective would say, hey, doesn't seem to be any risk here. This doesn't seem to be sensitive data. But that doesn't mean that sensitive information is actually not flowing in or flowing out. That's really depending on a few things. How is the API built in terms of its code, which obviously nobody wants to go in and do a code review for each one of those APIs. That could change in terms of how the API is calling other APIs. It could also change because of LLM, because of agents. Maybe this API, when it was just a developer that implemented it, wasn't pulling sensitive data. But now that it's being used in a different way, suddenly sensitive data is either flowing in or flowing out. So you really need to look at the request and response in order to be able to monitor and govern the data, which is actually, I'm going to now complete this task. Again, we want to keep it easy. We want to keep it at one click. So what Salt has done is say, okay, here are the different types of assets that are out there. One of them, and again, large organization, so apparently somebody else already monitoring one of them. Great, no action required on my side. However, another one, and that's actually the one that some of my more high-risk APIs are running on, is not monitored. Deployed just equals monitored for data. So I'm going to click on that. Very similar to before. I just need to do a click on deploying. This is a gateway, by the way. What I just picked is a gateway, and I want to use the Salt functionality. We do it via Lambda function in order to monitor it. So I'm going to do that. It's really asking me for one piece of information. So I just copy that. In my environment, I'm using something called a hybrid. Hybrid, think about it like a broker. Salt does not want your data. We are about telling you about security problems and if your data is sensitive, but we don't actually want to see the data. And what the hybrid does, essentially all the processing is done within your AWS environment, and Salt just has, hey, here's an alert, here's the inventory, here's a posture gap. We found that a certain field may be sensitive, but we're not actually pulling that information. So essentially you're getting data security without having additional exposure. So it's just asking me for that piece of information, and all right. And now I'm going to run another CloudFormation. I could have done this all in the beginning if I wanted to give the Salt permission from the get-go, but in this case, just made more sense for me to go step by step. First, do the read only, and now deploy. And I am now. It's running. It's starting to monitor the traffic. Same as before, it's going to take a couple of seconds. What's going to happen now is the Salt dashboard now has an additional layer of intelligence and information, and that additional layer of intelligence and information really has to do with data sensitivity. And we're just going to tell you two simple things: the request, the data coming in, nothing too bad. IP addresses, that happens. Location, not too bad. Usernames, makes sense. People authenticate. We're also going to tell you what information is coming out, which is probably the bigger risk, right? It's for the most part, it's not about the information that's flowing into your company. It's about the potential of the information flowing out. So we have this location information flowing out. Why don't we look into that and see what that looks like? And apparently, two of the APIs are sending latitude and longitude. If you actually go into this API, it's kind of cool. It's a vehicle, so it's actually telling you what the vehicle is. It keeps saying you say, hey, I'm here, so you can follow people. So again, cool functionality, but definitely very sensitive information. I don't know about you, CJ. I don't like being followed. Not that anybody's following me, I'm not that interesting. So definitely something that needs to be very closely governed. I'm sure there's like good reason, probably some functionality about showing something in a dashboard or a map, all good things. But definitely something that needs to be closely governed and monitored. And I need to understand that I'm sending out this data. I need to make sure that this API that's called /vehicles. I would have never guessed that's what it does from the name. By the way, that shows you how important it is to actually understand the data flowing. This needs to be closely monitored. This is very sensitive. It would allow a hacker, if he wanted to and was able to hack, to follow people that are using this application. So now I need to make sure that I've got the right policies in place, there's awareness in place, that this is actually something that needs to happen versus some nice to have type of information. So I now have this information and I can take the right steps, and maybe it's good. Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe I've got the right controls in place. The risk score is relatively, it's kind of in the middle. That's okay. And nothing bad. but that really allows me to understand that I'm sending this geolocation data. If somebody asks me for compliance perspective, hey, are you sending geolocation data? I know that I would say yes, but only for this API. If there's specific policies related to it, I know that that's here. So this is extremely useful from a data security and data governance perspective to really have that understanding. What data is coming in, what data is coming out, is it properly secured? Sorry, I know this was, I'm very excited about our solution, as all of you probably noticed. It's a very cool solution. CJ, I guess maybe some of your insights before we finish the demo and move back to the case study.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that we can't emphasize enough is how simple the setup was here. We deployed a single CloudFront formation template to get up and running with the collector, and then a second one just for the traffic mirroring to get a little bit more context in the data flowing through an API gateway specifically. But we didn't need to stand up specific agents or sensors. It was through two CloudFormation templates that you saw, both of which live, deployed in under a few minutes each. And we're up and running with all of the context we need to correctly categorize our potential security incidents and security events.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that. I should always remember to emphasize because it's so different. I've been in security for a long time. Security solutions are not easy. You mentioned agents. Oh my God, right? Endpoints, agents, all the bad stuff that gives you intrusive, inline, all the bad stuff. I needed to have my AWS account number. I needed to paste it. I clicked run CloudFormation. Done. And then for the other one, I didn't even need to go in and provide my account number again because Salt already had the context. I just needed to decide that I'm going to monitor it. Very, very little effort, a huge amount of benefit, right? So what's the benefit? That just by doing those basic things, unified visibility across what may be multiple regions, multiple accounts, business units that never heard of one another, the ability to posture, to understand what is my risk posture. Maybe I have a problem, maybe I don't, to govern it. Also measure it against different compliance frameworks if relevant, understanding what my data posture is, data is flowing in, flowing out, a lot of benefit. You can consume it within our UI, you can flow it into different other components. I know AWS has different types of repositories where you can have that information. So some really, really important things. And also, and I'm really just we're getting amazing feedback from customers on this, the ability to articulate it internally, right? So think about this as definitely an investigation tool, which it is, but also think about this as something that allows you to articulate internally what is my API risk. And what I just did was have things being bucketed by risk. Now I have it bucketed by internal, external. The external is the external, the internal is the internal. And what this is showing me, and this is a good thing, by the way, the things that I have externally facing the internet, there's relatively low risk there. Most of it is secure. There is some risk out there. We can definitely go in and understand what that is. A lot of my risk is internally. That's a good thing. Ultimately, things are sensitive. You want to keep them not outside there to the internet. So that's a good thing. It allows me to articulate, let's say I could split this by business units, I could split this by regions, I could split this by applications. So I could split this by infrastructure. Hey, is my risk around the gateways, around the application load balancer? Is my risk somewhere else? This is a very powerful tool to articulate internally to other stakeholders. Is there risk? What is the risk? And how it should be handled? People simply don't know. Internal stakeholders are saying, oh yeah, I think we have some APIs, or yeah, probably something's running there. And they're like super focused on the endpoint and probably trying to fund this very expensive, intrusive project about monitoring different things. And this is a very effective tool to say, here's where we have risk, here's where we don't. And I think that's actually an amazing segue to talk about the case study. Michael?
Yeah, thanks for doing that. I wanted to bring up, there was a couple questions, and they maybe you need to go back into the product. I'm not sure, but I can read them, and then maybe you can reply to them. Some of these I think you answered, but I'm going to go ahead and read it anyway, just to make sure we cover it. But it's the first question was, how do you get the API traffic from AWS, and what type of data do you pull or intercept from in terms of the API?
Great question. And again, you guys, CJ, you guys definitely have made it so easy. The how really depends on what we're monitoring. Is it a gateway? Is it an application load balancer? Is it an EKS? But let's talk about the gateway. there are built-in capabilities to put the request response, the payload, right, the actual information being sent to CloudWatch. I know I'm like being super over simplistic, but just to kind of understand, and then we're able to kind of pull that from CloudWatch. And that's really what makes AWS very powerful, this central logging capability. It's really what got sent in, right? So if I made an API request, what got sent back, which is the response and the payload associated with it. So that's the information that's being monitored.
Thank you for that one. Here's another question. We'll just do this and then we'll go to there's two more. We'll go to the case study, but it's is any resource being deployed on the AWS side or Salt reaching out to my AWS account from my Salt tenant?
Another great question. Actually, CJ, do you want to answer that? You mentioned the Terraform and how that's built, or do you want me to take that one?
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to. So primarily, we're configuring CloudWatch to share information, log information with Salt specifically. So we're utilizing the CloudWatch security solution within AWS to collect the aggregate logging from the different services, including API Gateway, and then pushing that to Salt for further analysis. We're not specifically standing up an agent or a sensor, but rather configuring CloudWatch to share the logging events with Salt. The kind of other side of that as well is when we do connect the traffic mirroring deployer or integration, that's utilizing Lambda to actually mirror the traffic that's coming in through API Gateway and share that with Salt as well. So again, doesn't specifically require an agent or an appliance to be up and running, but rather it is configuring CloudWatch and Lambda to help share that information with Salt.
One more on this, Ori, and this is probably less about Cloud Connect and how simple that is. This is more Salt in general, but we'll just, since someone asked it, I want to make sure we address it. But the question is, can Salt show what privileges an API has?
Yeah, great question. So I mentioned before, we're not just looking at what assets are out there, but how they're configured, right? So that allows us to have some visibility, right? We're not scanning the code of the API, but we are able to understand what different actions the API can take. Is it just a read API, a get? Does it do other things? What resources it can address? So think about Salt as a way to understand really a lot about this API in terms of how it operates on the outside, right? So like how do you authenticate into it? What data can you send into it? What data you might get back? And if there's any anomaly, suddenly you get, let's say, a post where it's always gets, then those are definitely things that we would able to detect and articulate. We're also able to understand which components within the API are related to the permissions model, right? So it's like, okay, there's obviously the basic authentication, but is field one like an authentication field? Is it an account ID? Is it a session ID? So through that, we're able to understand basically the permission model behind the API, which is very useful. It's a little more deeper than like this webinar, we talked about basic visibility, but if you really want to understand how this API was built and measure that against least privilege, right? You just want to make sure that there's only that everything is given least privilege, you'd be able to do that.
All right, so I'll mention to all of the attendees, if you have other questions, please put them in the Q&A. We'll pick them up after. We'll come back to them if there's any more after this. But I think, Ori, back to you and CJ for the case study.
Perfect. All right, thank you. There is one other question. I don't think we addressed it. Do we support masking 100%? Once again, Salt doesn't want your data. That's again the benefit of this integration with AWS. We're gonna understand if sensitive data is out there, analyze things, but really none of that data gets to Salt. We just say, okay, here's an insight, right? It's sensitive, it's not sensitive. It may be, as you saw, it showed us that it was a geolocation, but there was no actual geolocation data there, right? So it's just telling you, hey, there's a latitude and longitude. I'm not gonna now show you what that is. So 100%, and we do support masking. All right, airlines, big on APIs. There's what you would expect, which is the mobile app and the website. But just having worked with them a little bit, there's just so much more, right? It is amazing how much they use APIs, how much they use. I think CJ, you mentioned that Internet of Things, right? So they're like, think if you're an airline, your office is the world, right? So you've got this plane which is communicating with you. You've got basically different airports. We've got those little terminals. They have so much operations, even like stuff I wouldn't even think about. How do you schedule a crew, right? You need to do that, right? So apparently there's an app for that, right? So hey, Ori, you get to be on this flight. Oh no, I can't. So there's so much cool stuff that the luggage, right? So much cool stuff there. So this case study is really about, we probably overflow with them. I'm not sure if you like it, if you like them or not, but definitely a brand that you would probably know. And they came in from, hey, we know we have APIs. Definitely, it's a big thing for us. But to be honest, we really don't know a lot more than that. And they were saying, okay, let's schedule the deployment. Which quarter? Like, is this going to be in 6 months? Is it going to be 9 months? Are we going to be a gradual rollout where we do region by region? Do we need to get like a services company? And we're going, no, you guys need to open Salt and really do what I just did in the demo. And they were just shocked in terms of how fast it was, pleasantly. Less pleasantly shocked in terms of the fact, well, it was not really a shock. If you're in a big company, you're going to see some things that are really ungoverned just because of M&A and the size of the organization. Very, very happy customer, not just in the sense of the value that they've gotten, but also kind of the level of effort. Big AWS shop, by the way. Our solution, of course, works across different clouds, but they really love the fact that AWS and Salt were working together to build such an easy and great solution. CJ, anything you want to kind of talk about in terms of this case study or add for your insights?
Yeah, just want to add here that they follow basically the exact same process we demonstrated in the demo today. So while a lot of times you see a demo is typically a very simplified version of the solution, these are the same steps that this major US airline took in order to get Salt Cloud Connect up and running. Granted, with a much bigger environment behind it than our demo environment, but the process and the steps look the same. So within minutes, this airline was up and running with Cloud Connect, and we're able to uncover the rogue shadow APIs and get deeper insights into their total API fabric. So
Yeah.
just love to emphasize that.
And for me, it was the amount of real estate they have on AWS, right? So like this
Yeah.
different regions, different accounts, different departments, right? If we were actually going like agents and then trying to go in and install things, then they would have been right in your question. This would have been a yearly project. It wouldn't have been a session of a couple of hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ori, I think there was a question. I thought you had answered this when you talked about masking, but maybe the person meant something different. So they resubmitted it, and so I'll go ahead and read it for everybody, and then you can answer. But the question was any technical limitations to the data. In this case, I believe they mean the API data. What if it's encrypted? Can you still get access to it?
We can, but by the way, great question. I think slightly different maybe than the question before. API traffic, and especially if it is sensitive, it may be encrypted. There are, of course, termination points. At some point, this data is being processed, so we can sit on top of a termination point. We do have capabilities to decrypt data. So the short answer is we would love to work with you, whoever has the question offline. But yes, you don't need to decrypt the data for Salt. We have capabilities to do that. And that's a lot of times really simplifies the deployment. So this is a good question because that is also a big kind of overhead for deployment. Okay, every time I need to monitor this traffic, I need to go in, create a termination point, only send the API security vendor decrypted traffic. We are actually able, there's some really good technologies out there, and we're able to take those SSL libraries and do the decryption ourselves. Unfortunately, in terms of what I'm seeing, I don't know who's asking, I just know it's being asked. But if the gentleman or gentle lady did not get the proper answer, we would love to follow up with you offline and go into like actual technicalities or even your use case. But the short answer, yes, we are able to handle encrypted data. When we look at the data, we then scrub it, mask it, and then only insights and metadata go into the Salt platform. The Salt platform does not contain any sensitive data itself.
All right, I'm going to wrap us up here. We're at the top of the hour. First, CJ, thank you very much for your time, AWS time. Thank you for the partnership with Salt. Ori, thank you for all of your insight and expertise. Really excited about this solution we have, this AWS Cloud Connect, and how quickly and easily you can get up and running, getting visibility, starting to look at your posture where you might have risk or not. Super easy to do it. Literally takes less than 5 minutes. The best way to experience it, go to the Salt website, salt.security. You'll see a button that says get a demo or contact me, and we'll get you set up for a demo super fast. Well, so you can see it super fast. But go there, salt.security, and then go request a demo, and we'll reach out to you. All right, with that, Thank you everyone for joining today. Keep checking back to the Salt website for additional webinars that we'll be doing. Again, thank you, CJ. Thank you, Ori. Everybody have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a good one.
Thank you, CJ. Thank you for the talk. Bye.
Absolutely. Thank you.